It's been a while since I've been outdoors painting on plein air. I've been spending so much time in my art studio recently, not only painting but working on other things such as content creation, building a new website, making videos, and I've been spending way too much time indoors, to the point that I've been getting cabin fever. So on this particular day I needed to get outside, and luckily I have this beautiful scenery on my back doorstep. This is the Bay of Islands in northern New Zealand, and I'm in a place called Waitangi. I'm painting on an 8" by 10" linen panel. It's a medium weave Belgium linen that's mounted to a Baltic birch panel, and these are awesome for plein air painting, really nice and robust. And I'm sketching out my composition here using a mix of burnt sienna with some liquid original. Liquid speeds up the drying time, it also improves the flow of the paint, and it's absolutely ideal for painting outdoors. Quite often, because the paint starts to set a little bit with the liquid mixed in it, means it dries a little bit before you finish your painting, so it means you can layer on thicker layers towards the end of your painting, but also in general your painting will be totally touch dry within 24 hours. Now if you're new to my YouTube channel and it's your first time watching, welcome aboard. My name's Sam. I make painting videos and I especially love painting landscapes. So if you're enjoying this video so far, be sure to give it a like and subscribe to my channel. So let me explain what I'm doing so far with this painting. The thing about painting outdoors is it's quite different to painting in the studio, mainly because you're having to deal with the elements. So one minute it could be sunny and then the next minute it clouds over and it starts raining. And that's actually what happened with this painting, as you'll see in a bit. So really we've got to try and paint quickly here, and I start off by painting the dark values and shadows in the scene first. Now I started off by painting the cloud shadows first, using a mix of ultramarine blue, burnt sienna, titanium white and a little alizarin crimson, and they're kind of forming the basis of my palette. And I used the same colours for these tree shadows here, but with barely any titanium white. To start with, I'm not so much worried about the colours, but I want to quickly establish a tonal range in the painting, so that it's going to make it easier to paint the areas in light afterwards and get those recession of landforms. So painting your dark values first is really advantageous to help with this process. Now value is how light or dark your subject is, and the general rule of thumb is that we'll find our darkest darks and our lightest lights in the foreground. Then as landforms recede, the darks aren't as dark and even lights get a bit darker as well, and that's because the value scale narrows. Now if I've painted my main dark values first, it's not going to matter so much if the light suddenly disappears. It means I've already got an idea of where the light and shadow is in the scene already. Now I'll quickly go over the colours I'm using. I'm using oil paint, and the colours I'm using includes titanium white, burnt sienna, yellow ochre, cadmium yellow, cadmium red light, alizarin crimson, ultramarine blue and phthalo green. And the brand of paint I'm using is Blue Ridge oil paint, and if you want to get some Blue Ridge oil paints, I've put a link in the description box below. I love using Blue Ridge oil paints, they're beautiful to use. They're an artist quality oil paint, really vibrant, so I would definitely recommend them. So moving on here, so I've painted the sky in the background. That was a mix of ultramarine blue, some titanium white and a little phthalo green. And now I'm painting the grass that's in the background. So I've used a few colours here. I worked off the existing sky mix that I'd already made that you can see on my palette here. And then I added some more colours to make a basic green mix that I can then adjust as I work through the painting. So to mix these greens, I normally start off with yellow ochre, some cadmium yellow and some ultramarine blue. So this kind of forms the base of my green. Then I'll adjust the value with some titanium white, which makes it lighter. It also desaturates the colour as well. And then I'll add in some colours such as burnt sienna to kind of make the green look more natural, because the burnt sienna, it contains red, and red is opposite to green on the colour wheel, so it just knocks it back. And then I can even adjust the hue of the colour, create some emerald tones by mixing in some phthalo green. So all the while when I'm mixing these greens, I'm actually just using these colours and then just making adjustments to them. So if I want a more saturated green, I'll be using some more cadmium yellow in the mix. If I want to desaturate it some more, so say push the green back into the distance, I'll use less cadmium yellow and perhaps more yellow ochre. And again, I'll mix in something like a cadmium red light if it's in the foreground to push back the green, and even if it's in the distance, then I'll use a colour such as burnt sienna or alizarin crimson in order to knock that green back. Now when it comes to greens, you're really going to find your most saturated high chroma greens in the foreground. Like this grass that you can see here, it's a pretty strong colour, especially up here in the northern part of New Zealand, because we get a lot of rain. It's a kind of really bright green. And the thing with greens is if you don't mix them right, they can look awful, and a lot of people have difficulty with greens. So I prefer to kind of build up the saturation of the greens, definitely mix my own with blue and yellow, and then to balance out the green I'll mix in a colour that contains red. So this could be a burnt sienna, a cadmium red, or an alizarin crimson, a colour like that anyway. And then there's other ways as well, you're adjusting the value with some titanium white, for example. Now for this more straw coloured grass in the foreground, it's still the same colours, but there's more titanium white in the mix and more yellow ochre. Now the thing to keep in mind when you're painting grass is it's one of the more lighter values to be found in the landscape, and you can see this if you were to take a photo of what you're painting and just switch it to black and white. So that's something to keep in mind. Trees, however, are some of the darkest values to be found in the landscape, mainly because there's a lot of occlusion shadows, especially with forests or dense stands of trees. Plus things like pine trees and even these New Zealand native trees have pretty dark coloured foliage. So to mix the colours for the trees, say I was going to paint some pine trees, I'd use those same colours, but I'd be using a lot more ultramarine blue in my mix, and I'd be desaturating the colour a bit more with a colour opposite, a colour that contains red. Now moving on to the water here, it's kind of reflecting the sky but also some of this vegetation in the background, and for this I added some more ultramarine blue and titanium white and allowed some of that green mix to mix in with it, so the green mix from the trees in the background, and there's also a little yellow ochre in there. Now whilst I was painting, it was starting to rain a little bit, just sprinkling, but then I was thinking, is it going to tip it down in a minute? You can see the rain in the background here, but I really didn't want to stop painting. Alright, so this is the downside of painting in winter, is that although it's actually not too cold, the clouds gather pretty quickly and it's already starting to rain a little bit, so it looks like there's some showers coming through. Bit annoying, so I need to keep painting quickly and just hope that all my gear and my paint and everything and my canvas doesn't get wet, so we'll see how we go. Now this is just looking in the opposite direction of where I'm painting, and you can see it's raining a bit there in the distance. Looks like there's going to be some showers coming through, so I'm going to have to paint quickly and try and dodge that. One of the annoyances of painting outdoors in winter, but there you go, it is what it is. So despite the fact that it was sprinkling a little bit, I decided to carry on painting, and I was probably painting for about another couple of minutes, and then it really started to tip it down. So my painting was getting wet, but also my gear such as my cameras were getting wet as well, which is not good. So yeah, that my canvas is getting wet with the rain. This is real painting. And now it's really raining. Hopefully it should stop soon. Okay, so not ideal, but I'm trying to see if I can dry off my painting with the fan in my car. So hopefully I can get back to painting in a sec. Looks like it's clearing up. Right then, it looks like the rain stopped, so I'm going to get my cameras mounted back up and back to painting. Man, that was quite a bit of rain. I'll have to see if I can sponge that off with some paper towels, but I'm using oil paint here, so it should all be fine. Let's carry on. So now that I managed to dry everything off, I got back to work, and the next thing I started painting was the beach foreshore here. Actually, I don't know if it's really a beach, certainly very muddy anyway. but it's reflecting the sky, and it's also that kind of silty sand colour. So what I did was I used a mix of ultramarine blue with burnt sienna and titanium white and a little alizarin crimson, and the titanium white and the burnt sienna are the dominant colours in the mix. What I was trying to do at this point was just get the canvas covered with paint, and then I will go back over the various zones within the painting and just tidy them up, restate some of these dark values as well, and just bring out some more of the trees and other forms that were within the painting. Now, with all the hassle I've had with the weather this morning and my gear and my painting getting wet in the rain, it would make you think, why on earth would you want to paint outdoors? Well, there's actually loads of reasons. I actually love painting outdoors. I don't do it enough these days, but I've certainly done a lot of plein air painting over the last few years. And one of the things it does is it really makes you look at the landscape and really observe the colours and the values within the scene that you're painting. It also helps to loosen up your brushwork, because it really is advantageous to paint quickly. In fact, it teaches you to paint more quickly. You want to try and capture the essence of the time that you're painting, and the light's moving quickly. Quite often the clouds are moving quickly, and 1 minute sunny, the next minute it's raining, and you want to try and capture that moment in time on a canvas. So as I said, it helps to loosen up your brushwork, make you paint more quickly, and helps you to understand better the colours and values in the landscape. So it's also really good for your colour mixing. But all these skills are transferable to studio work as well, and I found that my studio painting practice has speeded up as a result of plein air painting. Now, another thing about painting outdoors is it's really good for your mind and your soul, because when you're painting outside, you're thinking about painting and not worrying about all the other things you've got going on in your life. Instead, you're outside in nature, painting some epic landscapes, getting some fresh air, some sunlight on your skin, and it just makes you feel good. Now, if you've not tried plein air painting before and it's something you would like to try, then check out the link in the description below. I've written a blog post on the beginner's guide to plein air painting. And I've also written a blog post that accompanies this video as well, so it's a written painting tutorial. So I'll show you step by step how I painted this artwork. I'll also give you a list of the colours that I've used and the brushes, all that good stuff. Again, I've put the link in the description box below. So back to the painting here. So I've got the canvas covered with all the main colours that I'm using, and now I'm going back and restating the dark values. So adding more layers of paint here, just bring out the form of some of these trees. So you'll see here the trees on the left, they're coming forward now in the painting after adding those darker values, and this is a mix of ultramarine blue with some yellow ochre. Then I'm also using that same colour and just mixing some of that into the trees in the background, and because they're of a lighter value, it's just mixing in and lightening the value of those shadows. So the shadows in those trees in the background need to be lighter in value than the shadows of the trees in the foreground in order for them to sit back in the painting. And now I'm going over the whole painting and just tidying up areas, restating some of these cloud shadows here, for example, just adding some more definition and form to the clouds. The other thing I wanted to do as well is to make sure that they weren't forming too much of a continuous line, so just breaking up some of these clouds and making them look more random. Now, if you'd like to learn more about painting landscapes in oils, then you should check out my new ebook, which is called Painting Landscapes in Oils. It's 102 pages long, full of tips and techniques based on my many years of painting landscapes. So in the book I take a dive into oil paints, what they are, how to use them, recommended colours, colour theory, understanding values and tonality in the landscape, composition, designing a painting, pencil sketching, painting skies, trees, fields, mountains, winter landscapes. And there's also 11 step-by-step painting tutorials in the book as well that you can follow along with, have a go at painting yourself if you want, or just be inspired by my painting style. This book's ideal for beginners and experienced painters as well. All this and so much more. So if you'd like to get a copy of my new ebook, then I've put a link in the description box below. And I'd like to thank everyone that's purchased an ebook from me. Your support is really appreciated. It helps support the channel and keep the paintbrushes in my hands, so thank you so much. Now then, back to the painting, and I'm just going over the various zones within the painting and just adding a bit more detail. Now I'll just talk about some of the brushes that I'm using. I'm using Rosemary & Co brushes, which I totally recommend. I've put a link to them in the description box below. But generally when I paint outdoors, I try and use the biggest brushes that I can get away with. So I'm really fond of using flat brushes, especially number 5 and number 3 flat brushes, which is what I'm using here. They're ideal for loose painterly gestural brush marks, so great for plein air painting. Now here I'm using a number 3 synthetic flat brush, which produces much more refined marks, so they're really good for painting some of these subtle highlights within the trees here in the distance. Now if you'd like to see the full version of this video and take a deep dive into painting, then you should check out my Patreon channel, and I've put a link in the description box below. Now lastly here, I've finished up the painting with my lightest values, just painting a few sparkles on the water. And with that, the painting was complete. That was a really enjoyable plein air painting session. I reckon that's finished. And I think I'll just leave it as a plein air painting. That was a really fun morning painting that. So I hope you enjoyed this video and it inspires you to do some plein air painting. Be sure to check out the blog post links where I demonstrate how I painted this artwork, also how to start plein air painting, and I've put the links in the description box below. Thanks for watching. I hope you're having a beautiful day wherever you are in the world. Happy painting, and I'll see you in the next video.